This is episode 336 of Jumblethink.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Jumblethink, where we interview dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers all about their journey of turning dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we're going to share some tips on how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. Our guest on today's show is Chris Kawaja. More about Chris in a moment. Whether you're a new listener or a longtime fan, if you've never subscribed to Jumblethink, head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts and click that magical subscribe button. That way you never miss another episode of Jumblethink. To make it even easier, if you head on over to Jumblethink.com, you'll find links to Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google, Pandora, pretty much everywhere. So head on over Jumblethink.com and check out what's going on there too. Now let's jump into today's conversation. Hey there, friends. Welcome to Jumblethink. My name's Michael Woodward. I am your host. We have a really fun conversation with Chris Kawaja lined up for you in a moment. Before we dive into that, we want to thank our friends over at Floxy for sponsoring today's show. If you need really cool graphic design, video editing, or even web development, they can help you at a low monthly subscription rate. All you have to do is head on over to Floxy, FLOCKSY.com/Jumblethink. And you can learn more about how they can help you with your creative needs. Now, today's guest is Chris Kawaja. Let me tell you a little bit about Chris. Chris is a Harvard Business School trained investment expert. He's worked with Goldman Sachs and Bridgewater Associates, and now he specializes in non-traditional financial advice to help the casual investor achieve better financial results in their portfolio. He has a book called How to Stash That Cash, the Ultimate Liquidity Portfolio. He is also the guy behind Upwarding.com, which gives some advice for personal finance, health, decision-making, with even a really cool toolbox for that. And he's also done some really cool stuff with amazing brands like BigChill and Blue Star. One of the other things I love is he is a part of a foundation called Hero's Journey Foundation. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff, covering a lot of ground in today's conversation. So let's go ahead and join the conversation we had with Chris Kawaja. How you doing, Chris?
I'm awesome, Michael. Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm excited to chat. You have a lot of depth to what you're doing. I know that some of the guests that we have on are very hyper-focused in like their story, their narrative, and what they're doing. You've kind of had an interesting journey through the world of investment, through the world of startups and building things in online and e-commerce and personal brand and personal message. There's a lot that you've done. Taking a step back, talk to us a little bit about that spark to start you on that journey and how you kind of walked through that discovery of what you really want to create.
Absolutely. So, what I love about your show is you're all about challenging the status quo. And in a way, I was the classic walking the path guy. I had good grades in high school. I got into a good college. I went to the good college. Then the best job, or what I thought was the best job available, was to go into finance. And then, I went to Harvard Business School because that was the next step. And I was doing all these steps. And in a way that hampered me because when you're successful on this traditional path, I think you question it less. Happily, I had an ongoing meditation practice that I had started in my teens, and it gave me a lot of self-awareness. It's something I would recommend to everybody, is some kind of self-reflective practice. And things just weren't exactly resonating. And I think this is something a lot of people can relate to, where there's just this little itch, where you just feel like you're not quite doing exactly what's asked of you in this life. And a big breakthrough for me was I had an opportunity to join a company called Align Technology, which makes Invisalign. And back then it was a really small business, probably, I'm guessing 1/30th the size it was now. It was pre-IPO. It was run by these two entrepreneurs, very visionary people. And there was something about that that excited me. It just was this spark. And the first step I took away from this standard path was just my heart started racing when I heard about this. And it was this intuitive, like, that's how I want to feel. I don't want to feel like, hey, I'm making money and I'm doing, what everyone told me. it felt bold, it felt interesting, it felt risky, and that was something that just appealed to me. So, I packed my bags and moved to California, and
Wow.
It was a great decision. And, obviously I'm not still working there. A lot of steps have been made from them, but I think all the steps from then have always had this sense of, what's getting my heart to race? What's really below this? And something that it doesn't come in words. It just kind of comes in a feeling and a sense that, hey, there's a new path opening up to you, and being bold enough to take that path, instead of saying, hey, I like the safety of where I am, or some security, or really truly a false sense of security, as we see when 30% of the country gets laid off in a month.
Right.
So, I think we have this false sense of security, but, the only security we have is really falling back on ourselves. And the path really started with just that initial spark, that entrepreneurial spark, where it was something that was off the path that just really sparked my interest and got my heart racing.
It's kind of funny. Last year, we were having, our business was having a hard year. And I remember talking to some people, and they're like, "Oh, why don't you just go get a job? And it's safe. You're going to be okay. You don't have to worry about the risk and all that kind of stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, but what you're offering me is really not safe." And what's funny is if I would have taken that job, we would actually financially be in a worse place now because of everything going on than waiting out some of the bumps that we were having with the business and getting on the other side of it. So it's like this whole concept of safe just because you have a job is really, really dangerous.
I couldn't agree more. The word that I find is a really dangerous one is comfortable.
Yeah.
And this guy, there's a lovely guy named Michael Mervosh who runs the Hero's Journey Foundation, this amazing nonprofit that's sort of a personal discovery. They help people with their personal past, personal discovery, spiritual discovery. And he asked this question. He says, why do you always have to be so comfortable?
Yeah.
And it's like we prize comfort above all these other things. And like, it's just not a path to a great life. Like it just seems to really block people from action. And if there's one thing, we talk about challenging the status quo. If there's one lesson, it's you got to just take action, and that action is uncomfortable, and being uncomfortable is okay.
Yeah.
Right. Just so much of our society has revolved around, air conditioned spaces and a feeling that we have the secure job, that the paycheck's coming in. And I just think it's nice we're going through this current shock in the world, because it's reminding us nothing is as it seems. There's always shocks, new normals, and what we really need is adaptability, not comfort.
Right. And I think for me, when I hear what you're saying there, which I completely agree, what amazes me is we demonize those people who are willing to step out. Oh, they made $1 billion riding on the backs of other people. No, they were willing to take the risk. The reason that Steve Jobs created something that was awesome, or Elon Musk is creating something awesome, is he was willing to get out of the comfort that others weren't willing to leave,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think also, there's a sense of binary sometimes that people have, like, I'm either going to be comfortable or I'm going to take this huge risk and ruin my life.
Yeah.
And so, like, one of the big obstacles I see is that people believe that, like, let's say they want to pursue a dream of being a juggler, just to pick something random, right? Like a juggler in a circus. They look at all the work between here and juggling in the circus versus what they're doing in their day job. Let's say they're a nurse. I'm just making it up. And it just feels too hard and too daunting because they currently are already a nurse and they are not a juggler. But it's not as binary as you think, because there's always one little step you can take. Even if it's, I bought a juggling book and 3 juggling balls, like that's a step you took, and then just take another step the next day. Right. And it's like I think we have this sense of binary that's just not the reality. And if you just keep following steps towards your dream, and aren't so sort of rigidly on, a new path, you were on this rigid path to become a nurse. Don't be on this rigid path to become a juggler. And by the way, as you go down the path to becoming a juggler, you may end up that you like being a clown better. Yeah. At least take a step, at least start. I mean, that's how I got into real estate.
Yeah.
I just took a random step, and now, we have this portfolio of real estate that I never imagined I would have had 10 years ago.
All right. So I want to step back now. We've kind of gotten into the meat of a conversation here, and it's good, really good. But, we want to personify this. We want to make it personal. When we talk about comfort and safety, relative to the world we're living in today, you're working at Goldman Sachs, then you're working at Bridgewater Associates. These are kind of the dream jobs for so many people that they look at it and say, well, when I get to that level at Goldman Sachs, I'm going to be happy. Life's going to be perfect. I'm going to be set for life. I won't have to worry. You lived that life. You were there, and yet you left it. There's a lot of people that would look at it and go, well, that's just craziness. Sure. So you realize this isn't what I want to do. You realize you want to step out. How did you convince yourself, like, okay, this is okay to do, even though some people are going to look at me and say, what in the world is this guy thinking? Or they're going to look at you and say, yeah, but that's not the safe play. How did you process that for yourself?
Look, I think there are various aspects to it, right? The first is, I think, look, there's some basic math around being in these very competitive environments, right? Like a Goldman Sachs or a Bridgewater, where 14 people are competing for every promotion, and they're all competent and as hardworking as you. So, if you want to get outside of that competition, and I think we can be more successful that way, if you just pick the intersection of things that's some combination of things that you are interested in, that you're passionate about, that you're good at, you're going to be the best at being uniquely you. And so I just have a generic belief that if that can't be expressed inside of Goldman Sachs, inside of Bridgewater, that you owe it to yourself to do that, because you're going to live your best and highest life that way. So I think just understanding that mathematical dynamic. I mean, I've certainly done, I would say, at least equally as well as I would have at those places with a much better lifestyle, living in a place I want to be. So I think one aspect is just understanding that reality. Another is, don't sell yourself short. I think that people tend to say, well, I only have these resources available to me. And there's a dynamism to resources as you go out on paths. And, I'll just give you the example of how I got into real estate, because we had touched on that earlier. I knew nothing about real estate, right? I heard about this opportunity in South Texas. I hopped on a plane. I ended up in this motel where, 1 foot moths were landing on my head all night. And the next day I bought 5 acres from a rancher, sitting next to his rifle.
Wow.
I knew nothing. That investment I ended up breaking even on after 3 years. Okay. But what it did is it got me in the game. Okay. I got to know that rancher. I got to know, a couple real estate brokers. Through those, I realized I didn't want to be in South Texas. I wanted to be in West Texas. Then I met brokers there. Then I bought another property. I realized that didn't work. And as I went, my resources grew tremendously. Not only my relationships, but also the people who were supporting around me. And everything I've found in life looks like that. Once you get started, people just appear, and there's a spiritual side to it, but there's also just the reality that if you're following your passion, the universe kind of meets you halfway. And so I think we sometimes make decisions from this place of like, well, with my current resources, I can't X. But well, with your current resources, what can you do? Can you take that first step? Mm-hmm. And then resources will start to kind of agglomerate around you. And I think there's a magical piece to this that I think every person who started on their dream will tell you, like, hey, I suddenly met an editor at a party, or I told a friend that I was interested in juggling and he had a brother who owned a juggling school. Like the world starts meeting you halfway, if not more than halfway. So I think there's so much power to just starting on the path. And I've learned that again and again and again with everything I've done, whether it's a nonprofit activity or starting a business, just the number of resources that just surface once you're out there open and learning.
I want to take a moment and kind of give a rundown of some of the things you're involved with.
Sure.
You've been in the world of investment. You have real estate. You're in some e-com stuff. So talk to us a little bit about the various spaces that you're playing in right now.
Sure. So, in terms of career kind of financial stuff, I own with several partners, several businesses. The one that I spend the most time on is a business called BigChill.fom.
Yeah.
We make products that you interact with every day, more beautiful and fun. And what we make most of is just appliances. And they're these beautiful appliances. You can get a 1950s pink fridge with a pivoting handle. You can get a turn of the century American industrial product with, copper hinges, all kinds of stuff like that. So that's the e-com business. I love that business. It's a great business. We've talked about the real estate. That's evolved a lot over time, but I've probably done every single kind of real estate you can imagine, from building a mobile home park to fixing a high-end home to owning, a triple net office building in Tucson, Arizona. So I've done a ton of stuff on real estate. Then there's some alternative investing I do, and that ranges things from mineral rights to legal settlements to everything else. I'm just very interested in this kind of new model of being able to diversify away from the stock market. I have a blog called upwarding.com and a book that has evolved out of that. And that book is really an alternative approach to stashing that cash. The book is called How to Stash That Cash. That came out recently in April. I did that with a co-author named Shannon Mattison. And then I have several nonprofit things I do, and those evolve over time. I'm on the board, or have been on the board, of an organization called The Hero's Journey. Now I'm in more of an advisory role. And I also do ad hoc volunteer things. Right now, the big need is a lot of people need personal protective equipment, and a lot of vulnerable populations need things like masks and swabs. And I've been working with various teams at the University of California in San Francisco, Section 8 housing in Oakland, San Quentin prison, to get them the supplies they need. So that's kind of a rough rundown, but it sounds random, but in every case, it's really, there's a passion pursuit behind it. So I'm busy, but I'm doing things I love.
Well, with that, this is a great time to move towards the end of the first segment. You mentioned passion here. How do you find purpose in what you do?
Oh, geez. So I have reflected at length, and, with coaches and through, hero's journeys and everything else, about the kind of life I want to live and how I define success. And so I have, very terse, pithy statements that I go over constantly. And I have images, I have, a painting somebody did for me that all reinforce the kind of person I want to be.
Yeah.
And so that's around me all the time. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I sort of find inspiration. I know what I want to do. I want to help other people make their dents in the world as much as I want to make my own dent in the world. And so to the extent I'm doing that, I know that I'm in alignment with how I want to be.
What is one challenge you're currently working to overcome?
So look, I find most challenges in the end are related to facing up to who we are. Okay, so I think in my case, I have a tremendous amount of energy to get things done. And I love executing, but I'm actually best at the first, call it 3 innings of the baseball game, not the last 6 innings. And I start a lot of things, but I don't think that I screen what I do aggressively enough. And so my process in the last couple of years has really been to focus just on those things that serve the highest and best purpose. And so I've just had to learn how to say no and how to do less. And, I have a bunch of sayings, but one is, and, a lot of people have versions of this, but if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. Mm-hmm. Unless something is absolutely pulling my energy and my passion, and it feels completely aligned with the kind of person I want to be and how I want to help in this world, I just, it's a polite no and move on. And, one thing I've learned is a lot of people, want my time for this or that. And I just have to say no a lot. And I've gotten a lot more comfortable with that, and it's calmed me down. But I think there's a long way to go on that path. As a guy who's so biased towards action, it's almost a problem.
And finally, what is the next big dream, idea, or goal that you have?
Man, I feel like I'm really in alignment right now, to be frank with you. I believe that this COVID coronavirus thing has given me a unique opportunity to express some of my strengths. And so that's today's dream. Mm-hmm. My long-term dream is just to have more impact on people and supporting them in their dreams. I mean, I get the biggest kick out of somebody who has a need, and I can help support that, whether it's my wife, she's starting a new dance movement practice. How can I help her? Or, my son now has, gotten really into baking. How can I support him in that? How can I support this organization, Hero's Journey, with they wanted to get more visibility, so I helped them get some meditations online. That's the kind of stuff I love. And so I don't think it's one big, huge thing. It's just more of that because I just love it. And it feels really in alignment with how I want to be.
We're going to take a break right here. And when we come back, we're going to continue the conversation into dreams and ideas and how you can actually find the things that are right for you. We'll be right back. Hey there, it's Mike. And as a small business owner, I understand that it can be really hard to hire an employee or a big agency to manage your graphic design, web development, and video needs. But there's hope. Our friends over at Floxy are here to help you. They offer unlimited projects by a vetted creative team for a flat monthly rate. Video editing, graphic design, writing, web design, and more. And they're constantly adding new categories. Best of all, as a listener of Jumblethink, they're going to give you 10% off your first month. And they're going to include a 14-day money-back guarantee. If you are ready for new business cards, a new logo, a new website, they're there to help you. So head on over to floxy.com/jumblethink. That's floxy.com/jumblethink to get 10% off your first month and start getting the design and development you need for your projects. Now let's return to today's conversation. We are back with Chris. All right, before we get going, what are some of the best ways people can connect, find what you're doing, and just start the dialogue with you?
Sure. So the best place to reach me is upwarding.com. And what I recommend, and this is just based on what people seem to like, I recommend signing up for my newsletter. It's 5 points every week. It takes about 90 seconds to read, and it's just the best ideas that I found that week. And it can range from why buying a Tesla is a terrible way to reduce your carbon footprint to whether you should wear a mask in coronavirus times to, why most investment advice is terrible to, you name it. It could just be a really pithy quote from a 15th century philosopher. So we dump 5 ideas in there and people it's a potpourri. They take what they like, but that's what we get the best feedback on. I do read every message that comes to me that is sent via the website. So you can obviously just reach out on that. And I do read every single one of those.
Super cool. All those links are in the episode notes. So you don't have to go far. Just click the magical button. It takes you to the land of Chris. It's there. Click it. We've had a lot of fun talking so far, and there's a lot that you're doing. But for a lot of people listening, you talk about the cohesion based on passion. They might not know what that looks like for them. They just know they're discontent where they're at. They're miserable at the job they're at. Or maybe their job has simply just gone away because of coronavirus, and they're just like, what do I do next? In your journey, you stepped out because you knew there was something better for you. Looking back at your journey, what would you tell those people who are in this transition or want to be in this transition on how they can start navigating it?
Sure. So look, the one thing you can't avoid when you're trying to find that next spark is self-reflection. Okay. And I think there are some tools for self-reflection. And I think there are some environments for self-reflection that are just proven to be really good ways of doing things. Now, you have to pick the one that works for you. So what would I say? First of all, have some kind of self-reflective practice. The most common one, and there's a great PhD study that backs this up, people who feel kind of most aligned with their goals and passions, like 90% of those people meditate. It's crazy, or have had a period where they've meditated in their life. An alternative is to journal. And, there's these things called morning pages that are pretty popular. You may have heard about, where you write 3 pages no matter what every day. Yeah. But some kind of self-reflective practice, because we've often lost touch of who we really are. Okay, so that's let's say the first leg of this stool.
Yeah.
A question that I think is really interesting for people and can be very helpful is reflecting back to a time when they were a kid.
Yeah.
Just had this like amazing moment and just kind of dialing in, like, what were those moments when you were a kid where you really just were so in the moment and so fired up? And look, it's not necessarily that you were doing some specific thing. It's a state. And I think dialing into what that was, what the environment was, who was around, how you felt, and understanding what that flow state felt like, I think is a really useful exercise. So kind of tapping back into those things, because that's before we had all these layers of societal crap put on us. So yeah. I think it's a very helpful question.
Yeah, it's really good.
And then the third one is, and now I'm going to go back to this hero's journey. Look, if you study centuries and centuries of people who've gone through individual self-discovery, okay, there is a theme that comes up again and again, and the theme is the hero's journey. Mm-hmm. And it's the theme that guides movies like The Matrix. It's the theme that guides 15th century Japanese myths. It's the theme that guides Native American traditions. But very, very typically, you have to leave the environment you're in physically. You actually have to get out of Dodge mm-hmm. and not be around the people you're usually around. So I did a structured hero's journey where I actually went to a mountain in West Virginia with people I'd never met. And it was an incredible experience for me by the Hero's Journey Foundation. But something like that, where you actually take leave of home, right? And go through a process of discovery with people who, are used to doing this. I think actually leaving the space you're in physically for days or up to a week, 10 days, on a guided journey of that sort. Everybody I know who's done that has said it is one of the pivotal experiences of their life. And, the quote I often hear for people who've been on these experiences, I feel like I woke up. Like I thought I was in a dream when I was there, but it turns out that was reality and I've been living in this dream.
Yeah.
So it can be really eye-opening in the way that, Keanu Reeves in The Matrix, takes the red pill, goes past a point of no return, leaves, meets a bunch of new people he never met who support him in a unique way to become himself, right? Like that process is a well-established process in humanity that I think is very effective.
Yeah. In some of the circles I live in, we like to call it a pilgrimage, to go away, to get reflection, to hyper-focus. I remember a couple years ago, well, this is several years ago now, when the Great Recession hit, or the lesser recession, I guess, maybe. Now, I went to Hong Kong and just went to a place to serve and reflect and pray. And for me, that looked like seeking God and finding his wisdom in that. And a story I've never actually shared on here. And there's much more to it, so I'll share it another time. But that pilgrimage was a place where I didn't know that there was actually a shift even coming for me, but getting away, reflecting, gave me that perspective of being prepared for what was going to come that I didn't even know was ahead for me. And it really set me up for the next, 10 years of what I was creating and doing. It was pretty an amazing journey. So I love that, getting away, getting to a place of pilgrimage and discovering that next thing.
It's hard to know. It's hard to know the chemical balance in the water when you're sitting in the water.
Yeah.
It's like you need to kind of refresh outside. And I don't like generic advice, but if I had generic advice, it'd be, do one of the three things we just talked about. Because I think without that, look, there's just so many layers. And I think finding what's truly motivating for you is it's such a critical part of life. I mean, we only have one life. Mm-hmm. And willing to put all your chips on black, that's really what this is about, is like, take that plunge. And, you need to kind of have your ladder against the right wall. And I think a lot of people don't have their ladder against the right wall. And so it's worth spending the month, week, days, et cetera, to do that. And there, like I said, I think there are a lot of different ways to do it. Those are some ways that have worked for me. But, there's a lady named Kate Bednarski. She has a website, 5steppingstones.com. She does a lot of work in this area, values exercises. I think it's Danielle Laporte has has something about, figuring out the 5 adjectives that motivate you the most. So there are exercises you can do just to get started. I would just say it probably actually matters less which one you do, and it matters more that you do one.
Yeah. It's that intentional action. I think
exactly
a lot of the resources I've seen that have impacted my life were not rocket science. They weren't even like, if you look at them on the surface, all that world changing, but there was a purposeful practice that changed and gave me an intentional trajectory that I think I would have missed if I wouldn't have gone through a process that seems very mundane, but can be world changing.
Yeah. Where you go, you flip from doing to being for some period of time. And then once you be and you're present and you're listening, I think, it's critical. I did not understand how important that was until probably my 30s.
Yeah.
And now that I see how important it is, I actively try to take the breaks, take the reflection. And some people do things like, look at a sheet every day of what their values are. I mean, there are a lot of practices after that, but I think just do something. Mm-hmm. Just do something.
I'm thinking through all the things that you've been involved with, from investment to real estate to e-commerce to the other aspects of thought leadership and writing that you've created. You could categorize all of those as opportunity. In the world of investing, there are opportunities. You have to decide which investments are right. In the world of real estate, there are opportunities. You have to decide which ones might be business or personally valid for your goals. In the e-commerce selections, you've had opportunities to invest and to be a part of growing these amazing businesses that are doing really cool things, and you have to choose. When you have so many opportunities in a vast space of all of these different genres, if you will, of life and business and of development, how are you deciding and filtering which opportunity is a Chris opportunity and which ones aren't?
So this is actually something I learned, let's call it post-formal education. Okay. What I learned is the best way to test something out is to try it on. Mm. Okay. And so a good example of that would be, let's say you were interested in, let's just say a type of investment, right? So I have this investment process that I wrote a book about called The Ultimate Liquidity Portfolio, right? And one of the ways I developed this was actually just trying it myself and seeing how it felt, and how it worked for me, right? And so I think this idea of testing things can be really, really easy, especially if we're in this world of, the internet where you can change your website in a second. And,
yeah.
But like test things out. Like, if you don't know whether you're going to like stand-up comedy or something, don't read 20 books about stand-up comedy. Like go to a show and then like do an amateur night for do 1 minute bit on an amateur night. I mean, the cost of a test is very small and the benefit of it is so huge. So I would just say, like, actually do it. I think people are very cerebral about this, and I've really suffered from that for a while. But hey, like, if you think you want to fix and flip a house, like, go put 3 offers on houses or 30 offers on houses at some unbeatable price. So you're not going to lose money, and just like try one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it sounds crazy, but there's so much power in the action versus the research. And the research is so theoretical. So I just say, whatever it is you want to do, try it. Like actually buy the juggling book and, try juggling for 10 minutes. If you hate it, that's a great lesson. If you can't put them down for an hour, that's another lesson, right? So I'm just a big fan of testing. Like if I want to invest in a stock, I'll always buy a little bit of it and then wait and see how I feel.
Yeah.
It's just, because if I buy some small amount and I lose 20% on it a day, it's not going to kill me. But once I've tried that code on, then I know how it fits. And it's almost like I do that before I do my second level of research.
Yeah. Get the emotion of the decision out and then make the data decision after that.
Yeah. And also tap into everything, right? Like in all these decisions, they need to align sort of from head, right? They need to make sense from head. They need to make sense for heart, emotion, and then they need to make sense at a gut level. And I think checking in on all 3 of those areas, if one of those is not lined up, you'll know it, right? They sort of happen in sequence too. Like usually your head goes first, then you have an emotional reaction, then you have like some kind of intuitive gut reaction. And if all 3 of those aren't yes, there's so many things you can spend your time on. Like, don't even spend another second. It's just not worth it. I don't care if you think you make $1 million doing it. It's just not worth it. Life's too short.
Right. I was watching something last night, and there was this profound statement which on the surface seemed really shallow and really empty, but then they went through it and they were talking about how there is no plan B. And I think that there's benefit and drawback to that. I think that sometimes there's buyer's remorse, like, hey, I have this dream, I go down the road, I find out that I hate it or that it's not for me. And then they kind of go back to the main mundane of like, I'm going to go get this job, or I'm just going to settle back into comfortable again. But there's a great lesson, and you were just talking about it there, that maybe that's not the right hat to wear, but you still like hats. And so you kind of pivot and you go from juggler to clown, or you find and learn. And I think that there are two dangers there. One, a lot of people with dreams or ideas, they go out and chase them. They go down the road and they find out that they hate it, and then they just check out. They go back to the plan B and they go back to safe and comfortable. Or the other thing is that they're so absolute, oh, this is the dream, it's got to be this way, it's got to look this way, that they don't see the beauty of what could evolve and grow and change out of the journey. And you mentioned the hero's journey and just that evolution of ideas and dreams. So talk to us maybe about one specific moment where the thing in your head or the thing in your heart turned out to be something different, and it either led to another opportunity or led to something better when you kind of uncovered the concept a little bit further.
Well, first, let me throw out a principle.
Okay.
Because I don't know if I have like a singular event as much as just more description of the process.
Yeah.
Look, I think that people want to not fail really bad, and they want to not suck. But the fact is, and we were talking about how, you've done so many episodes of this podcast, and I guarantee that you're much better in episode 100 than you are in episode 1.
Yeah.
I think you have to sort of be okay to suck at something. And I know that's a weird comment, but like, why would someone doing their first podcast expect to be great, right? Like, this is part of the learning process. And just, I think understanding it's okay to not be amazing at the beginning. Look, I talked about that first investment I did, where I bought this land from the rancher, and, I didn't really make money on that. But sucking at that led me to sort of suck less at the next thing and suck less at the next thing. And so what did I have in mind when I went there? I mean, I thought I was going to buy land and then maybe buy a couple of houses and rent them out to people working in the area. Well, it turns out I ended up doing totally different things, right? I ended up, building mobile home parks. I did a subdivision, ended up working with a multifamily developer. I ended up selling some land to somebody who wanted to come in and do something completely different. And so that wasn't on the agenda, but that's kind of where the excitement, passion, connections lied. And so the check-in was just more, is this a general area where I'm excited to get better at? Mm-hmm. Right? I think it's like, you can get excited about the dream, but I think we should hold the dreams a little more loosely and just kind of follow like, hey, this kind of seems like the right next step. None of us really knows what even life's going to look like 18 months from now, a lesson we're learning even more hard now.
I'm like 2 weeks from now for a lot of people.
Yeah. And so it's just like in a weird way, if you're optimizing the short term, the long term sort of takes care of itself. And Steve Jobs has did a great job explaining that in his life. And when I read stories of other kind of amazing, heroic, incredible people who've done these amazing things, their dreams evolved, and they changed and they adapted as they learned. And so I think that's kind of the gestalt of it for me. It's like there's just a lot of different streams, and I think being flexible. And if there's one thing I didn't learn in kind of linear school, it's that the world is squishy, Yeah. And it's very nonlinear, and opportunities present themselves at weird times, and you got to kind of listen to your gut and occasionally make bold moves. And, one thing I reacted to, you had this idea of people going back to some, let's say they're a nurse, they try to be a juggler, they go back to a nurse. And what I've learned is it's, swimming backwards. And this is a classic case right now of a lot of people sort of craving, when can we get back to quotes normal? Mm-hmm. during this COVID time. And I really react negatively to that expression because, there is no normal. There's normal 2.0 coming up. And let's look forward to that. And so instead of trying to swim backwards against the current, can you swim sideways? What did you learn by swimming? Can you swim to a different shore? Can you find something new? So kind of going with the flow instead of against the flow seems to work really well. And I think if you're waking up every day and doing the thing you're most excited about for an hour, and you do that every day for a year, I think you'll find yourself in a pretty great place after a year.
Yeah, that's so good.
Whether you had it planned in detail in advance or not, if you just actually took action, I think I'm actually willing to guarantee you'll be in a great place.
Yeah. We haven't talked much about coronavirus or COVID-19. It's been on the outskirts of it. And I don't want to talk specifically about COVID from the standpoint of how it's interrupted our lives or anything like that. But
it's just an interference pattern. It's an example of an interference pattern.
But what I love about it is for so many people, they're rethinking education. Maybe traditional school isn't the right school for my kids. Maybe there's a better option. Maybe it's charter schools. Maybe it's online learning. Maybe it's through homeschooling or experiential learning. They're rethinking business and how we work or where we work and how we connect with our teams and our businesses. We're rethinking government structures. We're rethinking economics. We're rethinking all of these things.
How lovely that we are, too.
Yeah. In some ways, it's like education's a great example. We're using a model. I wholeheartedly believe education is significant and important, but we're using a model that's not relevant to the new styles of evolution of business and how quickly technology is evolving. It's just not setting a lot of people up for success in the way that it has in the past. And It's so hard to make that pivot coming into education saying, hey, we should change this. And it feels like for a lot of educators or businesses like, hey, we're just trying to burn down the institution. And that's not the goal. But in moments of like this, it allows us to have a perspective of rethinking and reshaping.
Absolutely.
You mentioned, people going back and saying, I just want to get back to normal. How can they choose not to get back to normal and choose to say, I'm going to use this as a launching pad to create a new normal?
Sure. So, without beating a dead horse, I think it's, again, self-reflection. We are in this time where we've hit an interference pattern. And whenever something like this happens, whenever there's a fundamental change, whether it's one we pick, to go on a mountain in West Virginia or one that's thrust upon us like this situation, I say this is a great time to look at what you're craving, how you're wanting to address things, because it's really giving us an insight into ourselves. I mean, I'm looking at people around me. The people who are very fearful are expressing this through fear. The people who, love to research are learning everything they can about the virus. The people who, have always loved being with their kids. The list goes on. And so I think the very first thing is be reflective about what's changing your life and ask the question of what is it that you're missing? Okay. And really that's actionable information. How is it? Ask people to describe how they see you dealing with this. Is the number one thing you crave? My in-laws are extremely social people. So the very first thing they figured out is how can they socialize? Yeah. Right. My brother, he just loves researching things. And so his first instinct was how to research things and sort of get, really knowledgeable about the virus. And, the list goes on. And so just seeing what is your instinct? What is it that you want? And that is very instructive because it's coming from a place of reset. So I would just say really observe that. For me, it was just realizing that I want to help people through. I have a lot of experience in sourcing hard to find products because I dealt with shortages in one of my business years ago. And that's been very helpful to get nasal swabs for UCSF so that they can test more people. Right. And now they're able to test, the prison population at San Quentin. That wasn't something I was set up for, but it was something I was excited to do. I'm excited to help for. So what does that tell me? Well, it tells me a bunch of things about what I like doing and how I like interacting with people and things like that. So really watch what your instincts and cravings are now. I mean, this is a great litmus test.
We're going to take a break right here. When we come back, it's rapid fire questions. Next week on Jumblethink, we have a really special conversation lined up for you. Our guest is going to be Rob Paulsen. Now, you might not recognize his name, but I can guarantee that you will recognize his voice. He has voiced over 250 different animated characters, from Raphael and Donatello on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Yakko Warner and Pinky from Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain. He's also voiced Carl Wheezer from Jimmy Neutron, and the list goes on and on and on. This is a really fun conversation, and it gives you a little look behind the world of voice acting and creating character. It's really fun. You're not going to want to miss that next week on Jumblethink. Now let's jump into rapid fire questions.
Levez seulement le bras pour mettre l'aiguille sur le disque. Mettez le contact, reposez votre bras et attendez. Restez calme.
We are back with Chris. All right, are you ready for rapid fire questions?
I was born ready.
Nice. First one, as a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I was a kid right around the time the Toronto Blue Jays went from a terrible expansion team to a contender.
Okay.
So I absolutely loved baseball, and I wanted to be a Blue Jays outfielder.
Ah.
Yeah.
What is one tip you'd give someone with a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start?
You don't have to know where to start. Start in the middle. It doesn't really matter. I think the most important thing is just do something. I'd say you can take that dream, you could break it down into little subcomponents and break each of those projects down into subcomponents eventually you'll get to something which is just like, place one phone call to one person.
Yeah.
And just do that.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to start at the beginning. You can start anywhere and just enter the forest where the forest presents it to you, and you'll start finding your way through it eventually.
What is one change you'd like to see in the world?
I am very saddened by how much confirmation bias there is. I think it really reduces people's ability to relate to others. I think Facebook is a terrible contributor to this, where, if you have a political view, far right, far left, it doesn't really matter. You'll say something and then all of your friends agree with you, and then they post articles that agree with you, and you read articles and you go to the same, whether you're Fox News or MSNBC or anything in between, people just keep reading stuff that reinforces their beliefs rather than really listening and learning. And so I think it's just making society a little more divided and angrier when we really need to be pulling together. So I'd say seek disconfirming evidence. So if you always listen to Fox, listen to MSNBC. If you always listen to MSNBC, listen to Fox. Meet with somebody who disagrees with you. Ask them why and don't judge them.
Yeah.
And just make it okay to disagree. Look, that's the foundation of a democratic society, is the ability to disagree without being penalized by somebody saying, well, if you're an X supporter, I'm not going to shop at your store. I mean, that's not how democracy is built. So I would just say I'd really like confirmation bias to be replaced with a willingness to have people disagree with you in a civil way.
Yeah, I love that. That may be one of my favorite answers to that question so far. So love that. What do you want your legacy to be?
Sure. I alluded to this earlier. Originally I would say it was a little more the Steve Jobs, what is your unique dent in the world? But what really gives me a kick is supporting other people and what they're trying to do. So, we started our discussion kind of before we went on air of like, hey, what is it that I can do to support your podcast? Because that mutuality, you're helping me by having me on the podcast, and I would also like to help you. So supporting people in what they're trying to do is really what I get a kick out of it. And if I can help people live their fullest life, whether, like I said, it's my kid who's into baking, or you with your podcast and helping you extend the presence of that, that's really what I love. And so that's kind of what my heart's set on.
Where do you find inspiration?
So I would say I get a lot of inspiration out of little pithy quotes, surprisingly.
Okay.
Yeah. I think to be inspired, you have to be in touch with yourself. So we talked about that a little bit. But, typically there's some quote I've heard in the last week that resonates with me. I kind of react well to tightly worded ideas. So one that I really like right now is, don't try to be the best, be the only. And that's just this week's. It may be something else next week, right? So, once I hear those quotes, they often kind of can help shift my perspective on things. And usually if you read a bunch of quotes, you'll find the one that you need that at that time, right? So there's a reason why that one specifically resonated with me. And I've been listening to that.
What is one book you think every dreamer should read?
Sure. So I would recommend that everybody gets familiar with the Terry Fox story.
Oh, I don't know this.
So there are kids' books about Terry Fox, right? But Terry Fox was a guy who in his teens got bone cancer in his leg and he was an athlete. He had to get his leg amputated. Okay. He lives in Canada and he decides on this crazy whim that he wants to start running again and that he's going to run a marathon. And then he decides he's going to run across Canada, which is thousands of miles.
Yeah.
Okay. He has no money. He decides he's going to run across Canada, and his goal is to raise $1 for every person in Canada running across. He gets like $1,200 in a van, right? Goes with his buddy to the coast, the east coast of Canada, and just starts running on one leg, one wooden leg and one leg, like by himself in this like crazy, terrible thing, running like Canada's not a very populated place. So he's like running by himself in terrible rain, just this like horrible environment, brutal on his leg, it's like really tough on him and like nobody's following it. And just gradually, it's like I've been saying, people start coming out and they're like, oh my God, there's this kid who like, he's, trying to run across Canada. And then suddenly, bigger corporations started sponsoring him. And by the time he's a third away across the country, he's a national hero.
Wow. And
he's on TV and kids are like running alongside him, meeting him in the street, giving him money. And there's a tragic part of it. And that's that he didn't make it. And he ended up getting a more systemic cancer and dying.
Wow.
So it's this horrible, tragic end. But what you realize is he absolutely accomplished his dream, not in a way he thought, but he raised tens of millions of dollars. He became a national hero. And what I love about it is he just got started. He had nothing. Like he literally had enough money for like a ticket to get to the East Coast and like, touch the water. And then he had this like van and like, a few bucks for gas. And he was like eating, whatever he could eat on the way. And then suddenly, like he became this, and just look, the world supported him. It's exactly what I said. He had to go through some pretty brutal environments. He had to go through some pretty brutal stuff, but he had a dream and he's just like, I'm going to pursue this. And it made a huge impact on the world, made a huge impact on raising money for cancer. And even though it had this tragic ending where he couldn't finish it, he's a hero and he accomplished, I think, an even bigger dream. And so I just love that story. And, there's an ESPN story on it, but I can't speak highly enough about what a great message that is for anyone who has a dream.
Super, super cool. For you, how do you define success?
Okay, yeah. And so I think we touched on this a little bit. It's, I have a way that I like to live. And I think if I'm living in accordance with that, and look, I have a saying, we talked about these pithy expressions. It's ignite the extraordinary with a smile. And if I can do that every day, and at the end of the day, I'm like, did I help ignite the extraordinary with a smile? Was it fun and playful? Was I enjoying it? That's a smile. Did I ignite? Igniting is different from, doing the work to complete it. I'd rather support and ignite people in their dreams than do it myself, right? I can help them start. And then the extraordinary, right? Like I'm not interested in helping somebody, further their career at Goldman Sachs. I'm interested in the person with a dream, the person who wants to shake things up. I love solopreneurs and I love all the things that are going around solopreneurship, anything around that. So that really is what gets me fired up.
What is one trend you are currently excited about?
Right. So it's what I just mentioned in that last question, which is this solopreneurship. Look, I think that if we talk a little bit about this normal 2.0, I think we're moving from a world where instead of trusting institutions, we're trusting individuals. And the level of empowerment in an individual now in this interconnected world. Anybody can put up a website. You can find support for anything you want to do. You go to Fiverr, you can have somebody, help you become an artist. You can get trained in hypnosis via Zoom. I mean, the power of the individual that has been given by the internet and by access to, Upwork and these loose community connections, instead of these organized, or instead of, let's say, organized everything, organizations, governments, et cetera, and the power that these people have to create lives that work for them and also get a lot done, whether that's, a one-person business or, a one-person nonprofit. I think that's the power that is being put in people's hands. And now it's being followed in this environment by the trust that's being put in individuals instead of organizations. I think it's going to lead to amazing things, because I think individuality will be expressed much more. And I think it's really a time to express your individuality. So for those who are sitting in their status quo position looking for a change, there's never been a better time. The world's changing. I mean, I think we see the economy down and we think, oh, it's not a great time to start things. It's a beautiful time to start things because there's change.
Yeah.
And change is what you need, not growth necessarily at the beginning, because the growth is going to come. But the change environment, I think, is creating all kinds of opportunities. And I'm really excited to see how solopreneurs take advantage of that.
What is one habit you find helpful in your life?
I exercise every day. And I've defined exercise really loosely. And so if I stretch for 5 minutes, that's exercise. And if I run for an hour and a half, that's exercise.
Yeah.
The habit is to exercise every day. And then the expression of that is to be flexible. I've just found it's easier to do something every single day than it is to do it 6 days a week, 5 days a week, 4 days a week. And so by having that appointment with myself, exercise just seems really important in terms of, obviously my health, but also in terms of my mental state. I get a lot of emotional value out of, working up the endorphins.
Yeah.
And also a sense of accomplishment. I have like a fitness tracker, and it tells me, what my resting heart rate is and what my heart rate variability is and how many calories I burned. And it's kind of a nice sense of just continuing progress, which I like checking in on. So that's a nice habit. I mean, I have others, but that one I think is useful and easy.
What is one thing you wish you would have known when you first started out?
I think how nonlinear things are. The nature of the environments we come from are that there are these standard explanations for what it takes to be successful. Like we talked about this linearity, like, oh, Chris, you went to Stanford and Harvard, so therefore this, and you worked at Goldman Sachs. And I think, everything I've seen it makes sense in the rearview mirror. Right? So the world is squishier. And I just feel like if you focus on learning and growing, that will pay huge dividends. And in learning and growing, it's not going to come in as much of a linear book way as we think it does. And I think if we continue to learn from our environment and ourselves, we're unstoppable.
Final rapid fire question for today is, what is one dream you are still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
Well, I would have said write a book, but I just completed that. I'm intrigued. I've really gotten a lot out of these periods of solitude, and there are several long walks. And I don't know if that's, going up Mount Kilimanjaro or doing El Camino in Spain or something like that. I'm really intrigued by the idea of doing a 30-day pilgrimage of some sort.
Yeah.
With or without religious overtones, it doesn't really matter to me, but some kind of known pilgrimage journey that's extended and cool. The only reason I haven't done it is it's just hard for me to take, say, 30 days off. But I think that's something. To be totally honest with you, though, I really feel like my life is structured in a way that I'm working around people I love. I'm doing the things I love. I have a ton of flexibility. I don't require more income. I really am in a blessed place. I've got a family who I absolutely adore. So I don't feel like I want so much, frankly. But it sort of feels like it would be cool if I could do a 30-day, hiking trip. It would be nice and fun and cool. Maybe if I could mix some surfing into it.
There's got to be a pilgrimage with surfing involved.
Yeah, end at the ocean and get 10 great waves or something like that.
Nice. We always like to leave our guests have the final thought. What is your final thought for all of us today?
Be bold and brave. We've only got one life to live.
Yeah.
Really, honestly. I mean, I think you're better off trying to put all your chips on black and failing than you are trying to stay safe. I really do. I think that that's a life more fully lived. And I just think take the plunge, take the leap of faith. I really, really can't stress enough. Having seen people be on all sides of it and all levels of quotes failure, and I just take the leap. I only got one shot.
Chris, thanks so much for taking time out, sharing a little bit of your story, giving us some incredible insights into this world of taking risks and stepping out. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Michael. I love your podcast. Keep it up.
Once again, I want to thank Chris for taking time out to be on the show with us today. You can check out what he's doing. The links are in the episode notes. Now, here's my final thought for you today. As I listened back to today's conversation, there was this little quote that stood out to me. It was something Chris said, and I thought it was really powerful. He said, "We prize comfort above all these other things, and it's not a path to a great life. Comfort blocks people from action. What we need is adaptability, not comfort." There are things in your life that you probably have or do that simply aren't good for you. They're points of comfort, but they really are holding you back. I want you to take some time today and think about what are the things that allow you to go into autopilot that are comfort points, that are places that are actually not good. They bring simplicity to your life maybe, or they allow you to shut off, but they are bringing comfort in a way that's not healthy. And I challenge you today, take and find one of those things and stop doing it, or change your patterns to push into being more adaptive, more available, and into a life that's more fulfilled. Thanks so much for tuning into today's show. Now it's your turn to get out there, to dream big, and to change the world around you.
Légèrement espacé. Étirez-vous doucement, mais complètement. En avant, en arrière, sur les côtés. Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.